What if I told you that the secret to a youthful appearance isn't found in the most expensive creams, the most advanced aesthetic treatments, or the latest diet trends? What if the true fountain of youth was hidden in a place you never imagined, within your own psyche? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychologist, discovered something extraordinary that completely changed our understanding of aging. He realized there's a deep and unexplored connection between our inner life and our physical appearance, a spiritual secret that the beauty industry doesn't want you to discover. While we spend fortunes trying to pause time in the mirror, Jung revealed that the most radiant and youthful people share a common denominator that goes far beyond genetics or external care. They master something that's within reach of all of us, but remains invisible to most. Get ready to discover the best-kept spiritual secret about youth, a truth that can transform not only your appearance, but your entire life. The mirror of the soul, how your inner conflicts show up on your face. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to carry the weight of the world in their facial expressions, while others radiate an inexplicable lightness that makes them appear decades younger than their actual age? Carl Jung understood something profound that modern science is only beginning to grasp. Your face is not just a canvas of genetics and time. It's a living map of your inner psychological landscape. When Jung spoke of the psyche as a mirror reflecting our deepest truths, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He observed that every unresolved conflict, every suppressed emotion, and every internal battle we fight literally reshapes our physical features over time. The furrows between your brows aren't just from squinting at screens. They're geological formations created by years of internal tension. The lines around your mouth don't just come from smiling or frowning. They're the accumulated signatures of how you've processed life's experiences. Think about it. When you're anxious, your jaw tightens. When you're angry, your forehead contracts. When you're sad, your entire facial structure seems to collapse inward. Now imagine these micro-expressions happening thousands of times over years, carving themselves deeper and deeper into your features. Jung realized that what we call aging is often just the physical manifestation of psychological warfare we wage within ourselves. The revolutionary insight Jung brought to our understanding of youthfulness lies in recognizing that our faces are constantly responding to an internal dialogue we're often not even aware of. Every time you have a critical thought about yourself, your facial muscles subtly contract. Every time you feel guilt or shame, certain areas of your face tense up. Every time you suppress an authentic emotion to maintain a socially acceptable facade, you're literally sculpting your appearance in ways that add years to your look. But here's where Jung's discovery becomes truly transformative. Just as inner conflict ages us, inner harmony has the opposite effect. When you resolve psychological tensions, when you make peace with different aspects of yourself, when you stop fighting internal wars, your face literally relaxes into a more youthful state. The muscles release their chronic tension patterns, circulation improves, and that indefinable quality we call radiance begins to emerge. Jung observed this phenomenon repeatedly in his practice. Patients who underwent successful psychological integration didn't just feel better, they looked visibly younger. Their skin took on a different quality, their eyes became brighter, and their entire facial structure seemed to lift and soften. It wasn't magic. It was the natural result of ending decades-old patterns of muscular tension and stress response. The mirror of the soul reveals itself most clearly in what Jung called the eyes, not just the physical organs, but the entire orbital area that frames them. This region of the face is incredibly sensitive to psychological states. Chronic worry creates those deep horizontal lines across the forehead. Persistent anger carves vertical lines between the eyebrows. Unprocessed grief manifests as puffiness and darkness under the eyes. Suppressed joy creates a flatness in the eye area that no amount of concealer can truly hide. But Jung discovered something even more fascinating. Specific types of inner conflicts create predictable facial patterns. People who constantly judge themselves develop a particular tightness around the mouth and jaw. Those who live in fear of being truly seen develop a guarded quality around the eyes that creates premature aging. Individuals who carry unresolved anger often develop asymmetrical features as one side of their face becomes more tense than the other. The good news is that Jung also identified how these patterns can be reversed. When someone begins to integrate their shadow, accepting the parts of themselves they've been rejecting, the facial tension begins to dissolve. When they stop the internal criticism, the harsh lines around their mouth soften. When they release old anger, the asymmetries begin to balance out. When they embrace their authentic emotions instead of suppressing them, their entire face begins to glow with what Jung called the light of individuation. This process isn't just about relaxation or stress management, though those are important components. Jung understood that true facial rejuvenation comes from resolving the fundamental psychological splits that create internal conflict in the first place. When you're no longer at war with yourself, when you've made peace with your contradictions, when you've integrated your various sub-personalities into a harmonious whole, your face naturally reflects this inner unity. The most profound aspect of Jung's insight is that this transformation happens from the inside out, not the outside in. No amount of external intervention can create the radiant, youthful quality that comes from psychological integration. You can't Botox away the tension that comes from living inauthentically. You can't surgically remove the weariness that results from constant internal conflict. You can't apply enough moisturizer to hide the dullness that comes from suppressing your true nature. Jung's approach to youthful appearance was revolutionary because it addressed the root cause rather than just the symptoms. Instead of asking, "How can I make my face look younger?" he asked, "What inner conflicts are aging my face, and how can I resolve them?" This shift in perspective opens up possibilities for transformation that go far beyond what any external treatment could achieve. The mirror of the soul doesn't lie. Every day, your face tells the story of your inner life. The question Jung would ask you is this: what story do you want your face to tell? Because once you understand that your appearance is intimately connected to your psychological state, you gain the power to write a different story, one where inner peace translates into outer radiance, where self-acceptance creates genuine beauty, and where psychological integration becomes the ultimate anti-aging treatment. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. The shadow that ages. Why hiding who you are accelerates time. There's a reason why some people seem to age overnight, while others maintain an almost supernatural youthfulness well into their later years. Carl Jung discovered that the single most accelerating factor in the aging process isn't genetics, lifestyle, or even stress. It's the exhausting effort of hiding who you really are. What Jung termed the shadow isn't just a psychological concept. It's a literal energy drain that shows up in every line on your face, every gray hair, and every sign of premature aging. Your shadow, in Jungian terms, consists of all the parts of yourself that you've deemed unacceptable, the emotions you won't feel, the thoughts you won't think, the desires you won't acknowledge, and the aspects of your personality you've banished from your conscious awareness. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't. These rejected parts of yourself don't disappear. They require enormous amounts of energy to keep suppressed. And this constant expenditure of life force, is what accelerates the aging process. Think about it physiologically. Every time you encounter a situation that would naturally trigger one of your shadow aspects, perhaps anger, sadness, fear, or desire, your body prepares to express that emotion. Your nervous system activates, your muscles tense, your hormones shift, and your entire being mobilizes for authentic expression. But then, in a split second, your conscious mind intervenes. This isn't appropriate, it says. This isn't who I'm supposed to be. And suddenly, all that mobilized energy has nowhere to go. What happens to that trapped energy? Jung observed that it doesn't simply evaporate. Instead, it gets stored in your body as chronic tension, shallow breathing, compressed posture, and cellular stress. Day after day, year after year, you're literally wrestling with yourself, and this internal struggle shows up as accelerated aging. The person who allows themselves to feel their full range of emotions and express their authentic nature uses their energy for living and growing. The person who constantly suppresses their shadow uses their energy for internal warfare, and war is exhausting. Jung noticed something remarkable in his clinical work. Patients who began to acknowledge and integrate their shadow aspects almost immediately began to look younger. It wasn't just that they felt better, though they did. It wasn't just that they seemed more vibrant, though they were. They literally appeared to reverse aging. Their skin improved, their posture straightened, their eyes became brighter, and they developed what Jung called the glow of authenticity. The reason for this transformation goes deeper than simple stress reduction. When you stop hiding from yourself, you stop expending enormous amounts of energy on internal suppression. This freed up energy becomes available for cellular repair, creative expression, and the natural regenerative processes that keep us youthful. It's as if you've been carrying a 100-pound backpack your entire life and suddenly set it down. Of course you'd feel and look lighter. But the shadow's aging effect isn't just about energy depletion. Jung understood that living inauthentically creates a fundamental split in your being. Part of you is trying to be who you think you should be, while another part is desperately trying to express who you actually are. This internal division creates what Jung called psychological fragmentation, and fragmented beings age faster than integrated ones. Consider how exhausting it is to maintain a false persona. If you're naturally introverted but force yourself to be constantly social, you're burning through life force at an accelerated rate. If you're naturally emotional but constantly suppress your feelings, you're creating internal pressure that ages you from the inside out. If you have natural creative impulses but force yourself into purely analytical roles, you're starving essential aspects of yourself, and starved beings age rapidly. Jung observed that people who aged most gracefully were those who had learned to embrace their contradictions rather than hide them. They could be both strong and vulnerable, both serious and playful, both independent and dependent as the situation called for. This psychological flexibility kept them youthful because they weren't rigidly holding themselves in narrow, artificial definitions of who they should be. The shadow's aging effect is also cumulative. Every time you deny an authentic impulse, you're creating what Jung called psychological debt. This debt compounds over time, requiring more and more energy to maintain the facade. By midlife, many people are so exhausted from hiding their true nature that they look decades older than their chronological age. They've literally aged themselves through the effort of not being themselves. Jung identified several specific ways the shadow accelerates aging. First, there's what he called emotional constipation, the backup of unexpressed feelings that creates toxicity in the system. Just as physical constipation creates illness, emotional constipation creates premature aging. Second, there's creative starvation. the withering that occurs when you consistently deny your natural creative impulses. Third, there's authenticity anemia, the gradual draining of life force that comes from living someone else's life instead of your own. The most insidious aspect of shadow aging is that it's often invisible to the person experiencing it. You become so accustomed to the constant energy drain of hiding yourself that you think fatigue, dullness, and premature aging are just normal parts of life. You develop what Jung called shadow blindness, the inability to see how much energy you're spending on not being yourself. But Jung also discovered the antidote. The moment you begin to acknowledge and integrate your shadow, the aging process doesn't just slow down, it can actually reverse. When you stop fighting with yourself, when you embrace your full range of emotions, when you allow your authentic nature to emerge, you reclaim all that energy you've been using for internal suppression. This energy becomes available for healing, regeneration, and the natural vitality that creates a youthful appearance. The process isn't always comfortable. Jung was honest about the fact that integrating your shadow requires courage. It means acknowledging parts of yourself you've spent years trying to hide. It means feeling emotions you've worked hard to avoid. It means accepting aspects of your personality you've judged as unacceptable. But the reward is profound. You get your life force back. Jung observed that people who successfully integrated their shadow developed what he called the radiance of wholeness. They didn't just look younger, they looked more fully alive. Their faces showed the peace that comes from no longer being at war with themselves. Their bodies showed the relaxation that comes from no longer holding themselves in rigid, artificial positions. Their entire being showed the vitality that emerges when all your energy is available for living rather than hiding. The shadow that ages you isn't some dark, evil force. It's simply the parts of yourself you haven't yet learned to love. Jung's revolutionary insight was that the path to youthful vitality doesn't lie in perfecting yourself or eliminating your flaws. It lies in embracing your wholeness, integrating your contradictions, and allowing your authentic nature to emerge. When you stop hiding who you are, you stop accelerating time's effect on your body and being. You begin to age like wine instead of milk, becoming richer, more complex, and more beautiful with time. The power of individuation. When you become yourself, time stops. What if the relentless march of time that we see reflected in our mirrors isn't as inevitable as we've been led to believe? Carl Jung discovered something extraordinary that challenges our entire understanding of aging. When you fully become who you're meant to be, when you achieve what he called individuation, time doesn't just slow down, it seems to stop altogether. The most youthful people Jung encountered weren't those with the best genes or skincare routines. They were individuals who had completed the journey to becoming authentically themselves. Individuation, in Jung's framework, is the process of integrating all aspects of your psyche into a unified, authentic whole. It's the journey from living according to external expectations to living from your deepest, truest self. And Jung observed something remarkable. People who achieved genuine individuation seemed to exist outside the normal rules of aging. They possessed a timeless quality that transcended their chronological years, not because they were trying to look young, but because they had achieved a state of being that naturally generates youthfulness. The reason individuation has such a profound anti-aging effect lies in understanding what actually ages us. Most of what we interpret as aging isn't the result of time passing, it's the result of internal friction. When you're living authentically, when all parts of your psyche are aligned and working together, there's no internal resistance. Your energy flows freely, your body functions optimally, and your entire being operates like a well-tuned instrument. This harmony creates what Jung called the glow of individuation, a radiant vitality that makes chronological age irrelevant. Think about the people you know who seem ageless. They're not necessarily the ones who've had the most cosmetic work done or who follow the strictest health regimens. They're the ones who seem completely comfortable in their own skin, who move through the world with an easy confidence, who appear to be exactly who they're meant to be. These individuals have achieved some degree of individuation, and their outer appearance reflects their inner alignment. Jung understood that the individuation process requires what he called the integration of opposites. Most people spend their lives in internal conflict, trying to be good while suppressing their darkness, attempting to be strong while denying their vulnerability, working to be rational while ignoring their emotional nature. This constant internal warfare creates tremendous stress on the system, and stress is one of the primary accelerators of aging. But when you achieve individuation, you stop fighting with yourself. You learn to embrace both your light and your shadow, your strength and your vulnerability, your rational mind and your emotional heart. This integration eliminates the internal friction that ages you from the inside out. Instead of spending your energy on psychological warfare, you can use it for living, creating, and maintaining the vitality that keeps you youthful. The process of individuation also connects you to what Jung called the self, the deeper, timeless aspect of your being that exists beyond the ego's concerns with age, appearance, and social acceptance. When you're connected to this deeper self, you naturally embody qualities that transcend time: wisdom, peace, authentic power, and unconditional love. These qualities have an anti-aging effect because they align you with life force itself, rather than the ego's anxious concerns about mortality. Jung observed that individuated people develop what he termed psychological immunity to the factors that age most people prematurely. They're less affected by social pressure because they're not trying to be anyone other than who they are. They're less stressed by life's challenges because they've integrated their capacity to handle both success and failure, joy and sorrow. They're less depleted by relationships because they're not constantly trying to manage other people's impressions of them. This psychological immunity translates directly into physical vitality. When you're not chronically stressed by the effort of being someone you're not, your nervous system can relax into its natural state of balance. When you're not constantly worried about meeting external expectations, your body can focus its energy on repair and regeneration rather than defense. When you're living from your authentic center, you naturally make choices that support your well-being rather than deplete it. The individuation process also awakens what Jung called the creative principle within you. When you stop living according to preset scripts and begin expressing your unique nature, you tap into the same creative force that continuously renews life itself. This creative energy has a regenerative effect on every cell in your body. You begin to create your life rather than just survive it, and this shift from survival mode to creative mode is profoundly rejuvenating. Jung noticed that people in the midst of genuine individuation often experienced what seemed like physical reversals of aging. Their skin would improve, their posture would straighten, their energy would increase, and they would develop an indefinable quality of aliveness that made them magnetic to others. This wasn't the result of trying to look younger. It was the natural byproduct of becoming more fully themselves. The relationship between individuation and youthfulness isn't just psychological, it's biological. When you achieve inner harmony, your stress hormones normalize, your immune system strengthens, your cellular repair mechanisms optimize, and your entire physiology shifts into a more balanced state. This biological harmony naturally manifests as improved appearance, increased energy, and what we recognize as youthfulness. But perhaps the most profound aspect of individuation's anti-aging effect is its relationship to time itself. Jung observed that individuated people seem to live in what he called kairos time, the eternal present moment, rather than chronos time. the linear progression that ages us. When you're fully present, fully yourself, fully engaged with life as it's happening now, you step outside the stream of time that carries most people toward old age and death. This doesn't mean individuated people live forever in a physical sense, but rather that they embody a quality of timelessness that transcends their chronological age. They age gracefully not because they're trying to stay young, but because they've aligned themselves with the eternal aspects of their being. They've learned to live from the part of themselves that doesn't age, the soul, the self, the essence of who they are beyond their physical form. The journey to individuation isn't always easy. It requires facing your fears, integrating your shadow, questioning your assumptions, and sometimes disappointing people who preferred you to remain small and predictable. But Jung understood that this journey is the only path to genuine vitality and authentic youthfulness. When you finally become who you're meant to be, when you stop pretending and start being, when you achieve the integration that Jung called individuation, time doesn't just slow down. It stops being your enemy and becomes your ally in the ongoing creation of a life worth living. The masks that tire, how false personas drain your vitality. Every morning, millions of people wake up and put on invisible masks before they even brush their teeth. These masks, what Carl Jung called personas, are the carefully constructed identities we present to the world. While some degree of persona is necessary for social functioning, Jung discovered that when these masks become too rigid or too disconnected from our authentic selves, they become energy vampires that literally drain the life force from our bodies, accelerating aging in ways that no cream or treatment can reverse. Jung understood that the persona serves an important social function. It's the face we show the world, the role we play in our families, careers, and communities. A healthy persona is flexible, authentic, and serves as a bridge between our inner truth and outer expression. But when the persona becomes a prison, when we become so identified with our masks that we forget who we really are underneath, it begins to consume enormous amounts of energy to maintain, and this energy drain shows up as premature aging, chronic fatigue, and a general dulling of our natural radiance. Think about the exhaustion you feel after spending time in situations where you have to be on, performing a version of yourself that doesn't quite fit. Maybe it's the cheerful, always positive persona you maintain at work when you're actually feeling sad or frustrated. Perhaps it's the perfect parent persona you present to other families when you're struggling with your own children. Or it could be the successful, confident persona you project on social media when you're actually feeling insecure and uncertain. Each of these performances requires energy, and the more disconnected they are from your authentic self, the more energy they consume. Jung observed that people who lived behind rigid personas aged faster than those who allowed their authentic selves to show through. The reason is simple. When you're constantly performing a version of yourself that isn't quite true, your body is in a chronic state of low-level stress. Your nervous system never fully relaxes because it's always monitoring your performance, making sure you don't slip out of character. Your muscles maintain subtle tension patterns that support your persona, and over time, these patterns become permanently etched into your physical structure. The most aging personas are those that require you to suppress your natural emotional responses. If your persona demands that you always be happy, you're constantly using energy to suppress any sadness, anger, or fear that naturally arise. If your persona requires you to always be strong, you're depleting yourself by never allowing vulnerability or the natural human need for support. If your persona insists that you be perfect, you're exhausting yourself trying to hide your natural human flaws and mistakes. Jung identified several particularly draining persona patterns that he observed repeatedly in his practice. The eternal optimist persona requires constant energy to maintain a positive facade while suppressing authentic emotional responses to life's inevitable challenges. The people-pleaser persona demands continuous monitoring of others' reactions and adjustment of behavior to maintain approval, leaving no energy for authentic self-expression. The successful achiever persona consumes energy maintaining an image of constant competence while hiding any struggles, doubts, or failures. Perhaps most draining of all is what Jung called the composite persona, the attempt to be all things to all people. This involves constantly switching between different versions of yourself depending on your audience, never allowing your authentic self to emerge consistently. The mental and emotional energy required to maintain multiple personas simultaneously is staggering, and Jung observed that people caught in this pattern often looked decades older than their chronological age. The physical manifestations of persona-induced aging are specific and recognizable. Jung noted that people over-identified with their personas often developed what he called mask face, a rigid quality to their facial expressions that came from holding themselves in artificial positions for extended periods. Their smiles became forced, their eye contact became calculated, and their entire demeanor took on a performative quality that was exhausting to witness, and even more exhausting to maintain. But Jung also discovered the profound rejuvenating effects that occurred when people began to align their personas with their authentic selves. When you stop performing a version of yourself that isn't true and begin expressing who you really are, the energy that was being consumed by the performance becomes available for vitality, creativity, and the natural regenerative processes that keep you youthful. This doesn't mean throwing away all social grace or becoming completely unfiltered in every situation. Jung understood the difference between a healthy, flexible persona that serves as an authentic expression of your nature and a rigid mask that imprisons your true self. A healthy persona feels effortless because it's aligned with who you actually are. A draining persona feels like work because you're constantly fighting against your natural inclinations. The process of liberating yourself from draining personas begins with what Jung called persona consciousness, becoming aware of when you're performing versus when you're being authentic. Pay attention to the situations where you feel energized versus drained. Notice when your facial muscles are tense from holding artificial expressions. Observe when your voice changes because you're trying to sound like someone you're not. These are all signs that your persona has become disconnected from your authentic self. Jung observed that people who successfully integrated their personas with their authentic selves developed what he called effortless presence. They could move through various social situations without the exhausting effort of constantly changing masks. Their persona became a natural extension of their authentic self rather than a disguise that hid it. This integration had an immediate anti-aging effect because it eliminated the chronic stress of performance and allowed their natural vitality to shine through. The most profound transformation Jung witnessed occurred when people realized they could be loved and accepted for who they actually were, rather than for the personas they thought they needed to maintain. This realization often triggered what he called persona shedding, a process where layers of false identity fell away, revealing the vibrant, authentic person underneath. Clients who went through this process often looked years younger within months, not because they were trying to appear young, but because they were no longer exhausting themselves maintaining false identities. Jung understood that in our society we're often rewarded for maintaining certain personas, which makes it challenging to let them go. The workplace may reward your always competent persona even though it's draining your life force. Your family may prefer your always available persona even though it's exhausting you. Social media may celebrate your perfect life persona even though it bears little resemblance to your actual experience. But Jung's insight was revolutionary. No amount of external validation can compensate for the internal vitality you lose when you're not being authentic. The energy drain of maintaining false personas will eventually show up in your health, your appearance, and your overall sense of aliveness, regardless of how much approval you receive for your performance. The path to vitality and youthfulness, according to Jung, lies not in perfecting your masks, but in gradually aligning them with your truth. When your persona becomes a natural expression of your authentic self, rather than a disguise that hides it, you reclaim all the energy you've been spending on performance. This energy becomes available for joy, creativity, health, and the natural radiance that makes chronological age irrelevant. The masks that once tired you become transparent windows through which your authentic light can shine. Here's the uncomfortable question Jung would ask you today. If you removed all your personas right now, the successful professional, the perfect parent, the strong friend, the positive person, who would be left? And more importantly, how much of your life force are you willing to sacrifice to maintain masks that were never really you in the first place? The mirror doesn't lie about the cost of pretending, but it also reveals the profound beauty that emerges when you finally dare to stop.